100 years ago, yesterday, Captain Lawrence Oates stepped out of his tent into the Antarctic night, telling his fellow explorers, "I'm just going outside and maybe some time." It feels entirely appropriate that a century almost to the day later, we are here discussing heroism, the nature of heroism, what we mean by heroism. Today's talk is about the nature of heroism in a modern society, the nature of hidden heroism in a modern society. I'd like to begin by suggesting that our notion of heroism is largely shaped by that of the ancient Greeks, by the Bronze Age warrior culture of 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. Heroes are people like Hector, the last Trojan before the walls, standing against the entire Greek army, with Achilles, the greatest killer in that Greek army, at its head. Heroes are people like King Leonidas of Sparta, who stood and faced the might of the Persian Empire with the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. And of course, these notions of heroism are martial in nature, are military in nature. But the Greeks also recognised that heroism is about overcoming overwhelming tasks, overwhelming odds, dealing with the almost impossible to cope with. Perhaps our greatest example is Hercules. Hercules was, of course, this semi-divine hero and was cursed by the goddess Hera. He was cursed to have to complete 12 tasks. And most of these tasks were, of course, great fights, fighting beasts or monsters or slaying demons, if you like. But the fifth of Hercules' tasks was a deliberately demeaning one. Hercules was charged with cleaning the Augean stables, the stables of King Augeas. And these stables had 1,000 divine cattle, gifts from the gods, 1,000 cattle in these stables. The stables hadn't been cleaned in 30 years. So you do the sums here. 1,000 divine cattle, 30 years without cleaning. That's not an inconsiderable amount of poop. It's the amount of poop that stretches from here to the moon and halfway back again, if you imagine. So Hercules turns up in the morning, spade over his shoulder, whistling a jaunty tune, no doubt. Stands, looks, and no doubt his chin hit the floor. An enormous task. So what did Hercules do? Hercules, of course, like all good heroes, cheated. He diverted two rivers. The two rivers flooded through and washed out and cleaned out the stables. The poet Pindar tells us that later that day he went on to found the first ever Olympic Games. I think you'll agree, by most people's standards, that's not a bad day's work. Now, I want to suggest something quite important. I want to suggest, if you like, that heroism and bravery, although very closely related, of course they're closely related, are not the same thing. I would like to suggest to you that bravery is the action, bravery is the deed, bravery is the thing that men and women do standing against oppression, standing up against injustice, fighting and struggling for causes that they believe in, that we believe in, that society believes in. It is the deed and the action. Heroism, though, is something different. Heroism is something that people like you and I do. We create heroes. It is through the retelling and the recounting of the deeds of these men and women. It is through stories that we create heroes. We know about Hector standing against the entire Greek army because Homer tells us about it. We know about Leonidas and the 300 Spartans because Herodotus writes about it in his histories. We know about Captain Oates because it's written down in Scott's diary and that was picked up by the press and circulated around the world. We know through folk songs, through poems, through odes, through legends about these people. We recount, we retell these stories. And now in the modern age, we know about it through the internet, through blogs, and yes, through activities like TEDTalks. I want to suggest that activities, so bravery is things like standing, if you like, in the front line at the Battle of Thermopylae. Bravery is stepping up and going over the top in the Battle of the Somme. Bravery is coming off the landing craft on D-Day and marching into the enemy. And bravery is, yes, going out on patrol in Helmand province in Afghanistan. But heroism is more. Heroism is what we do. It's how we do it. And we have a role here. And of course, there's something contradictory about this nature, that if we're talking today about hidden heroism, then how do we retell, recount, regale these stories for these deeds that are, if you like, hidden? So I'd like to tell you a story. In 1995, I had my first ever car. And I suspect, like most people's first ever car, this was not a classic vehicle. In fact, the driver's seat was broken, which meant as you sat in the car and went round a corner. First of all, you swung out one way, and then you swung back in the other. The first time I ever drove a car that didn't have such interactive furniture, I was slightly disappointed. Anyway, 1995. I was driving through Leicester city centre with a good friend, with my housemate. And suddenly, from nowhere, a plume of thick black smoke erupted from the front of the car. There were flames, there was smoke coming out from the front of this car. And all the traffic came to a halt. And I did what I suspect many people would do under the circumstances. I froze. Actually, I didn't quite freeze. What happened is my brain went into overdrive. My brain went, blimey, that car's on fire. I may not have used those precise words. Blimey, that car's on fire. Right, have I got a fire extinguisher in the back of the car? Have I got a fire extinguisher? I don't even have a driver's seat that works. Okay, fire extinguisher, fire blanket. Have I got a fire blanket in the car? A fire blanket, but not a fire extinguisher in the back of the car? Are you crazy? Water. Actually, no, there's a problem there, isn't there? Water, petrol, fire, probably not a good thing. At this precise same moment, my friend sat next to me in the car, undid his seatbelt, opened the car door, stepped out into the road, and at the top of his voice shouted, "Does anybody have a fire extinguisher?" Absolutely confident that somebody would, and they did. And someone passed him a fire extinguisher, he took off the safety cap, he walked over to the car, rather coolly and casually to my irritation, slapped down the lid, sprayed, and the fire went down, sprayed again, and the fire went out. And he walked back, he passed the fire extinguisher back, and he got back into the car and said, "Should we go home and have a cup of tea then?" And we did. And I made it. In fact, like I made pretty much every single cup of tea in the 9 months that we lived together, and actually coming to think about it, like I did all the washing up and most of the housekeeping jobs and all the rest of it. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that these two things are equal. I'm not saying that they're the same thing, because my friend at that moment in time was absolutely and truly heroic. He thought, he was quick, he was decisive, he took action, he was the right person at the right place at the right time, and he did something valuable and useful and successful. But I guess what I'm saying is, as a society, or as a culture, I think we sometimes get blinded. We sometimes get blinded by the glorious deed, by the great action. And sometimes we forget to pay attention to, we forget to notice the little things, the small actions, because of course there are times when we need heroes, of course there are. But there are other times when we need small stuff, we need the little things doing, the small, dull, monotonous stuff that actually helps bring about and make a better society over time and helps make a better world for us. Now, I'm going to give a serious example of how we get blinded sometimes by the glory of heroism. In February 2011, the citizens of Benghazi rose up against the regime of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And they were undoubtedly heroic. They were brave, they had small arms, and they fought against the professional army. And over the next 6 months, the insurrection became a civil war, and the conflict rolled around the country, and of course there were great acts of heroism, and of course there were great casualties. But eventually Gaddafi was killed, the regime was overthrown, and and if you like, the war was won. But I want to make a suggestion. We were really good at supporting these people. We spent billions on missiles and shells and all the rest of it. But actually, right now, we have a problem. Because those people were undoubtedly heroes. Their actions were heroic. But right now, the last thing that Libya needs is heroes. Because what we're starting to see is the men who picked up guns and fought against the regime are actually hanging on to those guns. And what we're starting to see is private armies, private militias. We're beginning to see the start of gangsterism, so that the man with the gun is in charge. And right now what Libya needs is not heroes. What Libya needs right now is dull, boring people who could do things like fix the electricity, fix the sewage, fix the plumbing, who can do things like negotiate and bring about civil society, who can do the really inane stuff, who can go and collect taxes or whatever it is that's required. And our problem sometimes in the West is that we see the conflict, we see the heroes, we see the people acting, we see them doing things, and we think we have to intervene, and we spend billions on weapons supporting them, and we forget that once the fighting's over, there are other deeds, there are other things that require our involvement. Now that's of course a very serious example. I'd like to give you an example of something more mundane, something closer to home. I work at Nottingham Trent University, and part of my role each year is to help our new students start their life with us, to begin their experience of being a university student. And so what we do is we organise something called Welcome Week. Welcome Week is a programme of 350 activities. They're social, they're cultural, they're sporting, they're academic. And they're all designed with one goal in mind. And that goal is to create friendship. It's to make support groups so that when, at some point in the future, students face problems or anxieties or stresses, they've got a group of people around them who can help them out. And that's why we do it. And to do this, we are ably supported by our fantastic Students' Union. Our Students' Union work really hard with us. And what they do each year is they recruit 400 fresher reps, people like these. And our fresher reps are a funny combination of older brother or sister, drill sergeant, and Club 1830 rep, cheerleader, and Duracell bunny. They work phenomenally hard. They are truly heroic in a setting that's a university. And what do? Well, the first thing they do is, as the students arrive at university, they help get the students' stuff out of their cars and up into the student flats, into the bedrooms. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around a university hall of residence at the beginning of term, but it's an interesting sight. Most parents get it about right, and they turn up the car, and they take some bags out, and they go up to the room. Some parents, though, get it horribly, horribly wrong. And they turn up with their rather large estate car, and then if they're really organised, also they bring along a trailer. And if they're really, really organised, they've also roped in another family member who turns up in their car too. And somehow, through the miracle of compression, there is an expectation that all of this stuff, these bags, these clothes, these lamps, these yucca plants, these musical instruments, the sporting equipment, and all the rest of it will somehow get from all of these vehicles into the students' bedrooms. And what happens? On that first day, the fresher reps turn up all bright and excited. And what they do is to say, yeah, no problem, we'll get it up there for you. And they turn up, and they get the furniture. And then they get the clothes on top, and then they get the computer on top of that, and the pot plant, and the lamp, and all the rest of it, and they carry it up 4 flights of stairs, and they get to the top, and they get into the rooms, and they come back down, and they do it all over again, and they do it for 8 hours solid, and they work incredibly hard, and the parents love them, and the students love them, and they are walking 6 inches off the ground because they've done something heroic, and they are ever so proud. And they're brilliant. There's no dispute, they're brilliant. Throughout the week, we encourage them to help students to go out and enjoy themselves and to mix and mingle. And what they do is they encourage and they cajole and they draw people out and they drag people out and they get people going out to have a great and fantastic time. And then at the very end of the week, we run an event called Saturday Antics. It's a knockout competition. And we have a whole series of games and activities that take place. Some are very serious, like five-a-side football. But we also do tug of war. We also do the space opera race. And we also do the egg and spoon race, all designed to create fun and opportunities for students to laugh and share one another's company and enjoy. And again, the fresher reps are superb, and they shout and they chant and they encourage and they lead and they direct, and they are brilliant. We don't have a problem with the heroic aspect of fresher reps. They love the limelight. We can recruit them like this because they know they will be glorious. And they are. If we have a problem with our fresher reps, though, it's this. They work brilliantly with those students who are up for it, who are looking for a big night out, for lots of fun. Occasionally, though, we have a problem where they encounter students who aren't quite as bouncy or aren't quite as excited, who are homesick or nervous, or shy or quiet. And the fresher reps sometimes struggle to just find a way of connecting. They struggle to find a way of talking to these students, of clicking and connecting to these students. And in some respects, the most heroic thing that these fresher reps could do in that week is find a way to spend an hour talking to someone who isn't to them particularly interesting, or even just make them a cup of tea. We're here today talking about hidden heroism. We're here today talking about, I would suggest, the little things, the small deeds, the stuff that makes a better world. We have a problem of language. We know what a hero is. A hero is this person who acts and does great deeds, and we love that and we respond to that. But we need a word for a little thing or a small action. So I looked it up. I went, okay, what is the opposite then of hero? Is there a word that means someone who does these small deeds that perhaps aren't enormous, but over the space of time help bring about a better world? So I looked up the opposite of hero. What's the opposite of hero? Loser. Anybody fancy coming to a TED talk on hidden losers? It doesn't get much better. Coward. Nobody. Unknown. I think we have a problem of language here, folks. I think we have an issue. We don't have a word for someone who's brilliant and wonderful at these small things, these little things. And we need to do that. We need to find a word. So I'm going to put a challenge to everybody here. I'm going to suggest we have one of two options, one of two actions. Over the course of today, can we come up with a word that means a small thing, a good thing, but a small thing that brings about a better world over time? Is there something out there that we can come up with? Is there something we can think of? And if there's not, then as I suggest, heroism is something that we do, that we create, in the way that we retell and recount the stories. Maybe we have a responsibility as a community, as a group of people, to start to say, heroism is more than the great deeds. Heroism is also about the small actions that bring about change, that improve the world, that make our society and our planet a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Let's enjoy the rest of the day, shall we?